Okay, just now a couple things on theology which I thought were interesting and worth putting on camera. So this is on page 292. Dogmatic theology differs from philosophy in that its first principles are articles of faith adhered to by the communicants of some religion. A work of dogmatic theology always depends upon dogmas and the authority of a church that proclaims them. One thing I think is interesting is that for the longest time, especially with the birth of Christianity, I think has been the most, it's had the most impact, is that philosophers had been required, actually this is even before Christianity, philosophers have been required to almost, when they discuss metaphysics, if they believe that they can discuss metaphysics, unlike modern pragmatists, they don't agree that a metaphysics can possibly be discussed coherently. They would say it's nonsense. Metaphysics has been pretty well set in stone by a culture. So, for example, Socrates dies by his peers because he questioned religion. He questions the truths of the society. Aristotle, I think it was Will Durant, had a hunch that his unmoved mover to give the existence of some deity was actually a way of not getting killed by the society by questioning it, because Aristotle didn't need the unmoved mover. And so, in a sense, what has happened, so fast forward, of course, into Thomas Aquinas, although he was a believer, obviously, but everybody else, these people required that their metaphysics include existence that does not require a material form or an identifiable form, that you can have an existence without consciousness, an existence without matter. They had to take that, they had to accept it and build it into their philosophy. They couldn't question that metaphysics. They couldn't question it. It had to be set in stone as a presumption, and then they had to go from there and try to prove all their other stuff. Of course, now more modern, some people who don't agree with that, now they can be more creative with their metaphysics. They don't have to put it in stone. And they can focus their philosophy not on a basis of metaphysics. This is what I get from Ayn Rand, which I thought was really neat. Traditionally, philosophers have based their philosophy on a presumptuous metaphysics, as in with God, essentially with God in it. And philosophy had to account for God. Today, you can just get rid of all that, and you can base your metaphysics with your philosophy with a focus on epistemology, and not with the presumptions of a deity and solidifying your metaphysics. So continuing with theology, page 293. We are speaking here, as you can see, of the difficulties that face a non-believing reader of a theological work. His task is to accept the first principles as true while he is reading the book, and then to read it with all the care that any good expository work deserves. So, if you're going to read the Bible, you're going to think it's all nonsense and garbage and primitive man junk, unless you believe for the moment, just kind of take it in stride just for a moment, that all these people, something amazing and profound has happened. I guess not in their lifetime. No one that wrote the Bible, I think, was alive when Jesus was around. So something amazing happened in the past, a couple hundred years prior, and they're just talking about it, maybe stuff that they heard about it. And these people are just wowed by it. And it seems to really fit with a way of life and a way of dealing with the suffering of the day. You have to kind of take that before you can really appreciate what the Bible is, but perhaps if you're a non-believer, appreciate it as how it would be for others and why it's been so influential. Unless you do that, the Bible is going to be a waste of time to read if you're a non-believer. So if you're curious about what all the fuss is about with religion, You're going to have to take a few presumptions to begin, or it's not going to be worth your time. Okay, further on page 93. The notion of a canonical book can be extended beyond these obvious examples. Consider any institution, a church, a political party, a society, that among other things, 1. is a teaching institution, 2. has a body of doctrines to teach, and 3. has a faithful and obedient membership. The members of any such organization read reverentially. They do not, even cannot, question the authorized or right reading of the books that to them are canonical. The faithful are debarred by their faith from finding error in the sacred text, to say nothing of finding nonsense there. Orthodox Jews read the Old Testament in this way, Christians the New Testament, Muslims the Quran, Orthodox Marxists the works of Marx and Lenin, and depending on the political climate, those of Stalin. Orthodox Freudian psychoanalysts the works of Freud, U.S. Army officers the infantry manual, and you can think of many more examples by yourself. In fact, almost all of us, even if we have not quite reached it, have approached the situation in which we must read canonically. A fledgling lawyer intent on passing the bar exams must read certain texts in a certain way in order to attain a perfect score. So with doctors and other professionals, and indeed so with all of us when as students we were required at the peril of failure to read a text according to our professor's interpretation of it. So the point is that I think we all have experience with dealing with texts that we have to take authoritatively, and in the same sense that we, when we're studying for an exam, that we memorize, if we have to, the textbook's material on the question, even if the textbook is wrong, because if the textbook is later found wrong and you still write that answer in the exam, you're going to get right on it. So it doesn't matter. See, that's the point here. We have all already studied books canon-like, as in they must be accepted and cannot be questioned to get what we want, so a passing exam or whatever. And so the same thing has to be done if you're going to read anything about theology. If you want to read the Quran, you're going to have to take a law and all that stuff. You're just going to have to take it and then go and see what it's like. Then to appreciate it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. That's what you have to do to approach such a work. Okay, one little thing on social science. This is on page 302. Another is that stipulation of usage in the social or behavioral sciences is harder to do. It is one thing to define a circle or an isosceles triangle. It is quite another to define an economic depression or mental health. Even if a social scientist attempts to define such terms, his readers are inclined to question his usage. As a result, the social scientist must continue to struggle with his own terms throughout his work, and his struggle creates problems for the reader. The most important source of difficulty in reading social science derives from the fact that this field of literature is a mixed rather than pure kind of expository writing. The situation in social science is quite different. Much social science is a mixture of science, philosophy, and history, often with some fiction thrown in for good measure. Okay, this last section with about 4 or 5 pieces are just general comments that didn't fit in the previous sections. So this is on page 165 about the culture. Strangely enough, in recent years, for the first time in Western history, there is a dwindling concern with this criterion of excellence. Books win the plaudits of the critics and gain widespread popular attention almost to the extent that they flout the truth. The more outrageously they do so, the better. Many readers, and most particularly those who review publications, employ other standards of judging and praising or condemning the books they read. Their novelty, their sensationalism, their seductiveness, their force, and even their power to bemuse or bemuddle the mind, but not their truth, their clarity, or their power to enlighten. They have perhaps been brought to this pass by a fact that so much of current writing outside the sphere of the exact sciences manifests so little concern with truth. One might hazard the guess that if saying something that is true, in any sense of that term, were ever again to become the primary concern it should be, fewer books would be written, published, and read. This is absolutely the problem as well in academia. The whole publish or perish thing that happens with profs and grad students and all that. And when that is the incentive, when you're required to have gluttonous and verbose CVs, which are like academic resumes, then the kind of stuff you publish is going to be not your best work. You're just going to produce poor stuff. You're going to publish stuff off of your dissertation. You're just going to take little pieces off and just see what you can throw into some journal somewhere. And that's why we have such just a massive amount of writing that is done. So here's a piece for grad students, which I think is helpful for university students in general.